there was a lot of controversy in regards to al-Burda. And I would say the main reason why the controversy is there is because many times people misunderstood the pronouns and what they were referring to. So the pronouns, for example, might actually be speaking about the Lord Almighty, but people might have explained it that it was glorifying or over glorifying the Prophet ﷺ to the point of making him the level of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But here's one thing. It's so easy to confuse such pronouns and accuse al-Busri that somehow he was over glorifying the Prophet ﷺ to the point of bringing him or making him like he was the Lord Almighty. For sure, al-Busri did not understand that the Prophet ﷺ was somehow the light of the world or somehow that he was as glory as the Lord Almighty. Now, here's one thing. Even in the Quran, and because in Lugha Arabiya, such pronouns can sometimes be together within the line, but then it leaves it to the person, the context, to explain what that pronoun is referring to. Let's give an example. In the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِتُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَتُعَزِّرُوهُ وَتُوَقِّرُوهُ وَتُسَبِّحُوهُ بُكْرَةً وَأَصِيلًا. If you actually look at this ayah, لِتُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ, to believe in Allah and His Prophet, وَتُعَزِّرُوهُ, to give Him the support, وَتُوَقِّرُوهُ, and to give Him the respect and the respect and the glorification, وَتُسَبِّحُوهُ بُكْرَةً وَأَصِيلًا. تُسَبِّحُوهُ بُكْرَةً وَأَصِيلًا, even though it was really within the context of speaking about the Prophet ﷺ, but no scholar ever said that تُسَبِّحُوهُ, that it is in any way to pray or to glorify the Prophet ﷺ as if you were to pray to the Prophet ﷺ. And everyone understood تُسَبِّحُوهُ in that sentence or in that ayah that it's actually referring to the Lord Almighty. Now, this is just an example of how sometimes in Lugha Arabiya, the words, even when they were added with حرف العطف wa, that the context itself can speak for itself, whether it is referring to the Lord Almighty or whether it is referring to the Prophet ﷺ. And I think this is the place of confusion where many had confused whether al-Busiri had somehow meant the Prophet ﷺ with it or whether he meant Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with it. So I mean, I'm not saying that al-Busiri is somehow infallible. He might have made mistakes, and certainly if he had intended to glorify the Prophet ﷺ at the point or at the level of the Lord Almighty, that is definitely shirk in that regards, if he had meant to glorify him that way. But if we were to consider that Lugha al-Arabiya itself can contain different pronouns in where the sentence itself can actually go to noun A or noun B, then in that situation, we can use the benefit of the doubt and say, well, in that sentence, he actually meant Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on the context, and that he didn't mean Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Prophet ﷺ, sorry. And I think it's important to always understand the context before we would rush in accusing someone that wanted to praise the Prophet ﷺ or praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is committing shirk. He's a great scholar, and definitely the poem was really intended to praise the Prophet ﷺ, but there's no way that you can praise the Prophet ﷺ without praising the Lord Almighty. So I would say this is where the whole confusion happened, and that many times you would see this controversy because it's so easy to use whether metaphors or sometimes interpret pronouns as referring to person A or person B. And then if, of course, we're seeing these fine lines, and then you're going to fall in these interpretations, it's so easy. And I'm not saying he's infallible again, but it's so easy to accuse a person of probably not wording things right when he would have probably been there if he were to be alive, and say, well, I wouldn't do that, because the Quran itself would actually use different pronouns and actually refer them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the context is basically the judge to determine whether it's pronoun A or pronoun B. But at the end of the day, it depends on how you interpret it. And if you were to definitely interpret it as glorifying the Prophet ﷺ as the Lord Almighty, then definitely that would be shirk. But if you were to interpret it as, well, this was referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in the other verse or stanza it was referring to the Prophet ﷺ, then in that situation that wouldn't be shirk. So putting things in the right context is definitely going to clarify and take away a lot of the controversy. But I think a lot of people would just come in with a whole package of wanting to accuse somebody of committing shirk. So they come in really blinded, and then they take it right there and say, that's it, this is a shirki burda, it's haram. And then they will put all these labelings, and they're ready to absolutely just cancel so many beautiful things out. Assalamu alaikum.